Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be going over an article on how the United States and Europe are growing alarmed by China's legacy chip production. And legacy chip production are the older versions of chip production. The under 2 nanometer is considered to be kind of cutting edge. And so really most things before 2 nanometer, larger than 2 nanometer, is considered to be legacy chip production. So we're going to read this article and then I'll provide some commentary on it. So we see that US and European officials are growing increasingly concerned about China's accelerated push into the production of older generation semiconductors and are debating new strategies for containing the country's expansion. So far, United States and Europe have not been successful in their various economic sanctions in the trade war that they are waging on China. And so they have to come up with new ways of bullying China. And China is just simply adapting, they're innovating, they're becoming more of a sovereign nation because of these various sanctions, because various Chinese people and Chinese organizations are recognizing that there's really no using anything that United States has influence over in their supply chain, because United States will just take that away from them eventually. And so they're making sure that things are either domestically produced or they can get it from very close allies such as, say, Russia. So we see here President Joe Biden implemented broad controls over China's ability to secure the kind of advanced chips that power artificial intelligence models and military applications. But Beijing responded by pouring billions into factories for so-called legacy chips that haven't been banned. Such chips are still essential throughout the global economy, critical components for everything from smartphones and electric vehicles to military hardware. Okay, so something to remember here is things like electric vehicles and other military hardware do tend to use the legacy chips. And so when the United States is sanctioning China, they are doing so in order to hurt mostly the civilian economy, because the military economy primarily uses the legacy chips. And so up until now, the United States has been focusing on the most cutting edge advances instead of these legacy chips. But the United States is going all out now and trying to ban the legacy chips as well. That sparked fresh fears about China's potential influence and triggered talks of further reining in the Asian nation, according to people familiar with the matter who asked not to be identified because the deliberations are private. The U.S. is determined to prevent chips from becoming a point of leverage for China, the people said. I don't know how they're going to manage that, because everything about the chip production is essentially in East Asia, and China, due to its location, has a lot of influence not only domestically but also abroad. Things like Taiwan is going to be eventually integrated into China, and Taiwan is a major semiconductor producer. They will either be integrated peacefully, which is what China wants, or militarily, which is what no one wants aside from the United States. Then you have places like Japan, South Korea. They're heavily involved in modern technology, the chip making production. You have a Netherlands-based company, ASML, I believe it was the acronym. So that's really the only one outside of East Asia that the United States has, I would say, more influence over than China. China just, that is their sphere of influence. If things related to chip production are not directly domestically produced, it is still within their sphere of influence. And the United States is really having a lot of trouble competing within the South China Sea, East Asia type of region, because the United States has so many crises abroad right now that it is losing, that it can't really devote all of its attention, all of its effort on the China front, which is something that I personally said that China should be doing over a decade ago. This was probably around 2010. It was after the last financial crisis. And I said, listen, if China or Russia, if they want to be successful, if they want to make sure that United States can't tackle them one at a time, they have to make sure to spread United States thin across multiple different fronts. And that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing that in Ukraine, where United States is losing. We're seeing that in Israel, where the public relations campaign, the PR warfare, media and entertainment warfare, that's being lost by Israel and the United States. Sure, they're winning by killing as many children as they can, if you can consider that winning in any sort of moral sense, which I don't think you can, but I'm sure they view that as winning. But they are losing in the propaganda war, which is where they've traditionally been really strong at. So seeing them lose at that war is surprising. They're losing in terms of support in Latin America, which has been supporting Palestine. They're losing support in Africa, where there are coups in Africa against Western colonialist powers. South Africa is breaking off ties with Israel, things like that. So the United States is really, its attention is spread thin, and it's spread so thin that it's actually just losing across every theater of war between the unipolar and multipolar blocks. But anyways, let's move on back to this. I don't think these sanctions, these various trade war mechanisms are going to actually work out. While there's no timeline for action to be taken and information is still being gathered, all options are on the table. U.S. spokesman declined to comment. Okay, let's just keep moving on. Most advanced semiconductors are those produced using the thinnest etching technology with 3 nanometers state-of-the-art today. Okay. Legacy chips are typically considered those made with 28 nanometer equipment or above. Technology introduced more than a decade ago. So yes, they are mass producing 28 nanometer and above, but they're also showing that they can put into production lines a 7 nanometer chip as well, which is something that the West did not think China would be able to do for at least another decade. Okay, what else do we have here? United States and its partners should be on guard to mitigate non-market behavior by China's emerging semiconductor firms. Okay, so they're worried about United States dependency on China here, but the thing is, United States loves to have other countries be dependent on it. It just does not like to be dependent on other countries. And so there's this hierarchical relationship, this dominance relationship there, where United States says, oh, sure, it's fine for you to be dominated by us, for you to be dependent on us, but it's not fine for us to be dependent on other countries, other people, other organizations. And so you see this just complete asymmetry here in terms of how the international market and international supply chains work, where the United States tries as much as possible using things like its rules-based order BS to tip things in its favor and to make other countries dependent on it while it is not dependent on other countries. So let's move on. The United States and Europe are trying to build their own domestic chip production and decrease reliance on Asia. That's not been working out. U.S. introduced rules last October, slow down China's development. Okay, they left largely untouched the country's ability to use techniques older than 14 nanometers. Well, China is already doing 7 nanometers. So that technology, yeah, you left them the 28 nanometer, but they've surpassed your sanctions and have already gone to 7 nanometer. They're not at the absolute cutting edge yet, which is about the 2 to 3 nanometer range, but they are doing extremely well. So let's see what takeaways we have from this. I think one takeaway is just the geopolitical implications of China's legacy chip production. China has managed to invest strategically in order to make sure that it is not dependent on others. And that shows that they have a long-term vision for how they want to handle things in the semiconductor wars in order to make sure that they are a sovereign nation that is not dependent on others, specifically others that have hostile intentions, such as the United States. We see that the US-China tech competition and export controls are going to be increasing. I still don't think there are any mechanisms that the United States has in terms of economic policy that can really stop China, but it is certainly going to try everything in its toolbox before it, I think, inevitably pivots towards a war footing, which there's already a lot of talk about going to war with China. And there's already a lot of manufacturer consent for having a war not only with China, but also Russia. And they might as well just include everyone in the world aside from those under direct Western hegemony control. But a takeaway is President Joe Biden, like the former president Donald Trump, are really interested in the trade war. There's been no change of policy there between a Democrat and Republican-led administration. And so this is going to continue over and over again as a kind of cat and mouse game where the United States tries to catch China and China figures out very wily, innovative solutions in order to run away from the various sanctions, the various hindrances that the United States tries to put in its path. And I think this should be a wake-up call for countries on their national security and how the United States doesn't want other countries to be dependent on China, but they have no problem with other countries being dependent on the United States, and they also don't want to be dependent on China. And so they have this kind of hypocrisy where they only allow other countries to be dependent on Western countries, but not on other non-Western countries. And we see that any countries that want to have sovereignty over their own foreign policy, over their own economy, things like that, then they have to make an effort to secure domestic chip production, because with technological advances, you need to have semiconductor chips. I think there's certain, like waferless computer systems, things like that, that I've started to learn about, but I'll talk about that in other videos. But semiconductor chips right now are necessary for the latest technological advances if you want your country to be ahead. There are some broader implications to this article for the global supply chain, and that is that China's strategy is allowing for a parallel supply chain to be created for these legacy chips, and as we've learned in even more recent times, the 7-nanometer chips as well, where the Western hegemony is going to have its own supply chain, and China, because it's a manufacturing powerhouse, they're going to have a supply chain all on their own. And so there's going to be this parallel international economy forming, really revolving around China instead of around the United States and its subservient partners. And obviously that other parallel economy is going to be more successful because the United States just doesn't make things anymore. They're having a lot of trouble creating their own domestic production of semiconductor chips. So I think that's what I'll leave you at with this. If you found this to be helpful, informative, please give us a thumbs up in the algorithm. It helps us, and that can be on both YouTube and Rumble. We are pivoting as much as possible to Rumble. Please subscribe to our channel. Again, on both YouTube and Rumble, we are being suppressed in the algorithm on YouTube, and so we are pivoting as much as possible to Rumble. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, please leave that in the comment box below. Questions, concerns, anything like that. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.